Welcome everyone to another episode of We Talk. My name is Dakasi and I will be your host for today's discussion. We have amazing guests here with us and I'm just going to turn it over to them for each person to take a moment and introduce themselves. So starting at my top left here, Anthony. You're on mute.
All right. What's going on, everybody? My name is Anthony McGriff. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm a teacher in Crown Heights.
Welcome. Okay, now following Yana.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Ayana. I currently live in Texas, but I'm from Wisconsin. And I am an administrator at a home health care.
Welcome. That's so cool. Okay, next, Khadija.
Hey guys, my name is Khadija and I'm from the Bronx, New York.
Yay. Okay, Jean-Mo.
Hey, as you can see, it says Mohammed, but most people know me as Jean-Mo, and I'm from the Bronx.
The Bronx. Sitpa Samde or Elena?
Hello, I'm Sitpa Samde, but you can call me Elena or Astrid because everyone's easiest, and I'm from the Bronx.
Yay. And then finally, Lolia.
Hi, my name is Lolia. I'm currently in DC and I'm a recent graduate in environmental science. So thanks for having me.
Woo! Okay, round of applause for all the guests. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. All right, we have an exciting discussion set up for today. So the topic is, in his recent BET acceptance speech, Burna Boy ended it by saying, in order for Black lives to matter, Africa must matter. What are your thoughts on this statement? You guys feel free to go off mute and share your thoughts on. This is where the conversation starts.
Okay. Based on what he said, I think Africa does matter, but the way our politician leaders are dealing with Africa, or like basically the whole continent is divided. We don't act as one, we don't trade with each other. All our money goes into, I guess, Western countries and Western banks, because the first thing we do is invest in other countries instead of investing in our own countries. So that's just my thought in it.
Yeah. What do you understand specifically by his point? Because he's alluding obviously to the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening predominantly here in America. But he says for Black lives to truly matter, Africa must matter. What do you understand by that?
But I feel like when you talk to people, or like when you tell them that you're from Africa, like a lot of people are ignorant about like where you are or what country you're from. Like some people even think Africa is a country and not a continent. So we don't matter to them, even though they're taking all of our resources to build their lives, but we don't matter to them.
Who's the they?
Westerners in general.
Westerners. Okay. Anyone else? I see, Yana, you're shaking your head here. What are you thinking?
I was shocked by his statement, honestly. I feel that, and this may be controversial, but I feel that Black Lives Matter movement, of course, it's for all Black people, but it was made specifically with Black Americans in mind. And so I felt like he could have made his own statement saying that we should see the importance in Africa without kind of co-opting that phrase. He could have said it in a million other ways. We've been talking about that for, decades now, that people feel like we don't respect and value Africa and Africans enough. So there was a million other ways he could have said it. I just felt like it was a little weird to use that phrase on BET, just my opinion.
Okay. Anthony, I see you have some, what are your thoughts?
I'm trying to absorb, everything everybody else is saying. I think that if you literally translate what he says, in order for Black lives to matter, Africa has to matter. Like, there's literally, it makes sense as far as like Black people, in Africa. I think there. But I also hear Ayana? I also hear what Ayana's saying when she's talking about like how how the Black Lives Matter movement was made here in America for a specific purpose and a specific context. Now, as to whether it's right or wrong, I don't even know if that's what we're here to decide or even talk about. But I think I understand where he's coming from. If we look at like imperialism of European countries and how they have gone into Africa and used it up for its resources, changed its culture, inserted their language, and kind of made various religions disappear. We can see that white supremacy culture has had a huge impact on Africa as a continent. It's had an impact every single place on this earth. So I think literally translating, yes, he makes sense. And I also agree in that, like, we have to continue to unpack how white supremacy continues to manifest itself, not only in America, but also in Africa, because it is a resource-rich continent. And we're continuing to abuse the resources they have there, exploit people, and take advantage of, the disparities that exist for Black people in general.
Okay. Jean, I see you went off mute.
Yeah. I honestly, so there's few ways you can take it. And then if I am to play devil's advocate, I feel like what he meant by that was pretty much that. So the way people look at Africa is a reflection of how people look at, I'd say, Black people here, because I believe the exact thing he mentioned, he talked about royalty or something like that. Like in Africa, people, if you lived in Africa, like, you'll see that people actually empower each other over there. I'm not talking about politics, but people are proud. Proud from coming from Africa and all, right? And over here in America, like, you don't see that as much. Like, if you're Black and you're in America, people look at it as, you're just, I guess, a Black person in America. Like, you're lost in this big continent, this big place with majority of white people. And we don't really matter because the image of Africa is, like, lost. People don't see what Africa is. But if Africa has the posture and the image of maybe like China or something like that, you'll see that reflect on every other African descent everywhere, across the globe. So I think this is where he was coming from when he said Africa must matter, because we have to start from the beginning. If Africa has a huge and strong image, everybody else is gonna be respectful of Africa and everybody that's Black. So I think that's what he meant by that, and I agree with it. So.
Okay. Wow, shy group here. Khadija, what are you thinking?
Can you repeat the phrase? He didn't say Africa must matter first, right? He just said Africa must matter.
Yeah, he said, in order for Black lives to matter, Africa must matter.
So I can see where the notion of, like, respecting Africans would set this tone, I guess, for all others because we are descended. But I think that rhetoric is very dangerous because it also gives respectability to Black people everywhere only if they're connected to Africa, only if they claim descendancy to Africa. And I think it's important to recognize that, like, for example, African Americans in the US, they are deserving of rights whether or not they claim that they come from Africa or whether or not they can trace their genealogy back to Africa, right? Like, so I think the thing with that statement is that it can be very dangerous. And I think it's also imperative to understand that, like, in the States too, there's a reason why there's certain discriminations, like, that are acted out against Africans compared to African Americans. They're not always viewed the same. So to kind of group them all the same is to kind of diminish the fact that they go through different experiences. And so you can have Africa being respected, but that doesn't mean Black lives are going to matter in the States. They're one, and, like, they're not the same. It's not fair to group them. It takes away agency. It just puts respectability on them just for the sake of the white man's gaze or whoever it may be. So I think it's a very dangerous statement to make. And I don't think it's cool to go in and just drop one-liners without really going into depth to make sure it's not misconstrued or taken any other way. It's lazy work, in my opinion.
Okay.
Khadija made some very fair points, honestly. I always notice that there's also some sort of disparity between African Americans and, people on the diaspora from Africa. But the thing is, when we're all here, the first thing that people see is the color of our skin. So we're technically still all Black. But I don't know why there's this divide between African Americans and Africans.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue question. Do you feel as if his statement is a depiction of the relationship between Black Americans and Africans?
I wouldn't know exactly how to answer that question, but I do know that we all go through different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So over here you have the dynamic white versus Black, and back in Africa you have the dynamic the powerful versus the poor. So I guess it's not fair to group them all together because we all go through different things. But yeah, I don't know. I'll give that question to somebody else.
Yeah, no, of course. Anyone, it's up for grabs for anyone. Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of goes back to this idea that when it's something specifically for Black Americans, then it's for all Black people. So like, I think it was Khadija who said it. Someone said it earlier, but it's like, this is a Black American thing that Black Lives Matter was made for. And like I said earlier, I do agree that Africa should matter. We should respect Africa more, all of that. But for him to mention it at BET, which is a Black American show made by Black Americans, watched by mostly Black Americans, like it seemed like he was kind of pinpointing something, like who was his audience, like it seemed like he was speaking towards Black Americans, because I don't know the exact stats about, what % of the viewers are Black Americans who watch the show, but we all know it's mostly Black Americans who watch the show. So it's like, who are you, who was the message for? Because I don't know, I just feel like it's okay for us to have separate things. And if there was a police brutality problem in Burkina Faso, for example, and y'all created some kind of movement, I wouldn't then be saying, oh, well, that's for us too, because we have that here too. And, we're Black too. It's like, no, you guys have your own thing there. And I would support it. I would, post about it. I would learn about it, but I'm not going to try to claim it as my own, just my opinion.
Okay.
I think.
No, let's hear from Elena first, and then we'll. Okay.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned that it was a show, BET's a Black entertainment platform, watched mainly by Black people, who invited an African artist to come in and receive an award. Up until very recently, African artists even were not considered as though they made it until it was widely known in America. So just speaking to that, they didn't really matter until America started looking at African artists as a whole. So like the fact that on the Lion King album, Tiwa Savage, Yemi Alade, and Umu Sangare got a platform to perform here. Just recently, what's her name? Angelica Kidjo got a platform in America as well. They are big back home, but nobody here knows who they are. She sung this song, Pata Pata, from a South African artist, and nobody knew what that was. That's just interesting to see that. I feel like he used his platform well, because it's just highlighting a different problem. It's nobody knows until America knows. And so I feel like that's what he was trying to do there, not just hijack a movement or like piggyback off of something just to add it up onto out there that like, yeah, we all talk about this and stuff like that. And you also mentioned if there was a police brutality problem in Africa, in Burkina, our race problem is not the same back home than it is in America. Race is Black versus white is only as big because it's American. Different ways that Black Lives Matter apply when it comes to different African countries. So we still have terrorists that are attacking us every single day. We still have concentration camps and all of that. And when we want to sit down and talk about the specifics, we only talk about in pertaining that has to do with America's impact throughout the world, never really everything else. Because we were European colonization instead of an American one, so, or a British one. So nobody really even thinks about, oh, let's bring Africa. No, whenever you want to talk. And then even when we mention African countries, there is a hierarchy of countries that get mentioned before even a French-speaking country will ever make the platform. So I feel like everything is tied back in America to what America has done and where it's going. And for an African artist to use his platform on an African American, type of stage, I feel like it was it was a good thing to do. It's just putting it out there for everybody's interpretation, and I've obviously it opened this kind of debate. So it's like, okay, now we have to think about it. What are we missing? What are we not missing? What can we do? All of those kinds of things. So yeah.
I think. Sorry, Anthony, do you want to go? Do you want to go?
You can go ahead, Khadija, and then we'll go to Anthony.
Okay, like Ayana, did I say that right? No. How do you say your name again? Sorry.
Ayana.
No.
Sitpa Samde or Elena, however you want.
Elena. Okay, so like the thing is, when I hear like what you're saying, it seems like there's this approval of Africa from the West, and now they're crying that they're not getting this approval, and they go on and they say, we want approval. We want you guys to know we matter too. But like, why do Africans need Americans to know they matter if they're in Africa? And they're doing like, I think like it's projecting, it's into like, why is there this constant seek of approval from the West in order to validate that you approve? If you're big in Africa, shouldn't you be considered big, period? You need to be big in America to be considered. That's the interpretation that I got from like the first half of your speech about like kind of coming, like when you were trying to give insight on Burna Boy's perspective of like why he would use that platform. I do think like that thinking, it translates to me as like a projection and a need for Western approval. And it puts him in a position where he's going to a certain event and he's using the platform incorrectly, because now you're screaming, we need your attention, and telling them to move away the gaze from problems that are happening in their own home, in their own base. And Black Lives Matter in America, that is America's first priority. It should not be Africa. Africa's first priority should be Africa. And Africa alone should be responsible for Africa to a certain extent. Yes, we've had certain things happen to us. And yes, that is because of the hands of Europeans and Americans and even like, Asians. But like at the end of the day, Africa should be trying to save Africa. It shouldn't be looking for other people to come and save them and try to get this idea of like, we need you guys to know we matter too and move accordingly.
Can I answer real quick before?
Yeah, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, and that's why I made that statement. And then followed with, they're big. People here just didn't know that they were big until America started to give its approval. So it's not really that Africa or West Africa is seeking the approval of the West. It's just, like I said, putting it out there for you to just know that this exists. But we are still dealing with the things that we are dealing at home. And the reason why America is such a big thing when it comes to like these kinds of issues or conversations is because it is the manifestation of the entire world, because there's such a huge concentration of all different kinds of people here. And the fact is that everything else can matter here. So why not just this as well? And again, it's not really that it's trying to take away from the fact that we are concerned with what is going on in our country or any other countries in Africa. It's just, it's more things to put out there than that is already out there. Just add this and put this to your thought, bring it to a thought, because I feel like a lot of times when we say, like I said, even when you mention African countries, there's still a hierarchy. And like Nigeria is well known here, Ghana is well known here, even Ivory Coast. But if you ever say Burkina Faso, they're gonna be like, what? And they'd be like, oh, Haute Volta. They're gonna be like, what? Even some Burkinabe here didn't know that Haute Volta was our country's name at some point, It's just more information to be put out there for people to just know about.
Okay. Anthony, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I guess it's clarification. I'm having trouble understanding what the tension is with his statement, and that's just like from someone with my background and my understanding of the issue, and I think it would be helpful to maybe draw it out a little bit more. The way I didn't see Burna Boy say this statement, but for me, I was kind of interpreting it the same way Sid Pasamde was saying it. Did I say that right? Where it's not so much it's one or the other, it's a both and. Black Lives Matter here in the U.S. and they matter everywhere. And if we're not showing that, do Black lives really matter? I'm hearing all the arguments. I think that there's valid reasoning going around, but I'm still a little bit confused. Because for me, white supremacy culture is global. It's not just American. For me, the oppression by people in power, whether it's governments or police, those are all like around the world are manifestations of white supremacy culture. And I mean, even if you look at right now, it's like the biggest global movement has been happening where we have protests for Black Lives Matter, not just in the U.S., but in at least a dozen other countries around the world. And I see the positivity. Now, that's just my bias. Know if one of you ladies or gentlemen can, or whoever wants to share, like if you can just like break it down for me a little bit more about what this tension is with saying Black Lives Matter and connecting it back to like Africa.
Yeah, and before someone answers, I actually have two follow-up questions to that, because do you feel like Black people really resonate or understand the Black Lives Matter? I feel like people have different interpretation of the Black Lives Matter movement. So it would be helpful to also hear your own interpretation of the Black Lives Matter movement so we understand best where you're coming from. But also, do you feel like the interpersonal issues with, or I should say between Africans and Black Americans kind of like transpire into this social issue and therefore a lack of representation and acknowledgement? Do you guys get that? Okay, now that's throwing it out there.
Okay, so to answer that question, I do agree that there's a disparity between African Americans and Black, and then Black people in Africa, because I lived in Africa for 17 years, and looking at African Americans when I was in Africa, I was like, why are these people so angry? Why, like, what's going on? Because like, you know, we don't understand what they're going through because we're not living it. And now living here, I've educated myself. A lot of people also have helped me educate myself, and I see that, oh, there's actually a problem here. You know, they're not just screaming for no reason. They have a reason to be angry. But a lot of Africans don't understand that. They just like, you know, brush it aside. And I also heard that some Africans say that, oh, the African Americans are just mad because, you know, they think we sold them to another continent, etc. But yeah, I was gonna say what Khadija said. Like, I agree that Africa should also be the ones to save their own continent, because, you know, it is their problem. I guess permanently it's like their problems in their lives that they should uplift themselves. But at the same time, Black Lives Matter also helped some, especially like during George Floyd's protests, they actually helped other African countries like in Kenya deal with police brutality and shed the light on it.
Okay.
My response to Anthony would be that the reason it was surprising for me, and the reason I think I was shocked by it, and also my 14-year-old sister who was watching it at the same time had the same reaction, is because the entire show, I don't know if you all watched the show, but the entire show was police brutality against Black Americans, like very shocking images, performances about police brutality against Black Americans. So the entire show was pretty much about that, and the George Floyds and the Breonna Taylors, and it was, the whole show kind of connected with the American side of Black Lives Matter. And so for him then to take his spot, because he didn't have a very long speech, I won't even say that, his wasn't very long, but for him to take his, you know, I don't know, 30 seconds or however long his video was of accepting his award, to not really speak on any of the problems that everyone else was addressing, you know, that Black Americans are facing, but to say, oh, you know, Black lives can only matter if Africa matters. Like, it just seemed kind of out of place. That's all. And not, like I said earlier, not like he was wrong, not like he was incorrect, but it just seemed out of place when the entire show was kind of addressing the problems that Black Americans are having. And then for him to not address that just seemed weird to me. That's it.
I'll ask you a question. So my question, I guess, would be, do you think, I listen to Burna Boy, but I don't know much about him, to be honest, but do you think that he has the cultural context to really on the relationship between Black Americans and police brutality, or that he was kind of what he personally can relate to? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it kind of messed up in the last part, but I think I understood your statement. I don't think that he probably has the cultural basis or a good enough idea about it to make some grandiose statement. But
Wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. There's like a bad echo. Would you mind, all, if you're not speaking, going on mute so that we can better hear Ayana? Thank you. Okay, go.
so I was saying that I don't believe that he has the, the cultural knowledge or, enough information to speak on the problems Black Americans are having. But that's most people in America, that's most people that are not Black in America don't have that knowledge. So I'm not expecting him to be out here, protesting and, every single one of his posts to be about Black Lives Matter. But, he could have done what every other white celebrity has done, which is just say Black Lives Matter and let that be that. Or he could have not addressed it at all. Or, there's literally a bunch of other things he could have done. But I do think he knows his Nigerian culture and his African culture. And I do think that it was very purposeful. And I don't think it was like a spur of the moment decision for him to say that. I think it was very calculated that he chose to say that on BET. So that's my opinion. I think he meant to do that, and that was just the statement he chose to make,
Can I piggyback off Ayana? So also how Ayana mentions okay, what if he didn't know or whatever, or if he did know, then it was calculated. I think also if you're going to use that platform, you need to do the work. It's not last minute you knew you were coming to the BET Awards, so you're just not going to prepare anything. And it's there was so much room for you to do the work. Listen, if I'm going to speak somewhere or I think there's a possibility, I'm not going to wing it. That's why I said it was lazy of him, because if we do give him the benefit of the doubt and be okay, he wasn't aware, it wasn't calculated, it's lazy work. Also, to Anthony, before Ayana spoke, I wanted to Ayana broke it down as well. But the analogy that I would use for why is it a problem for you to be Black Lives Matter, but Africa has to matter too, is kind of if I'm having a birthday, say we're cousins, and I'm having a birthday party, and I invite you to my house, right? And all of a sudden, there's a flood that starts in my house. Your house could be flooding too. That's okay. But when you came to my house, it was to celebrate me. Now there's a flood in my house. You're going to sit there, look me in my face and say, yeah, my house is flooding too. What is the purpose of that? Are you going to help me? Or what do you want me to do? Do you want me to run out of my house to go to your house to stop the flood when I have a problem in my house here? That doesn't mean you're not free to go to your own house and stop the flood. That doesn't mean you can't help me in my house with my flood. But I just think it's out of place for you to tell me, yeah, my house is flooding too, with the expectation that I'm supposed to do something about it. Because Burna Boy said that phrase with the expectation that they're supposed to be, African Americans are supposed to do something about it. Because let's be clear that he was speaking to a certain audience. There wasn't white people in the sitting down listening. There were Black people, African Americans.
Okay. I have a question.
If I can add to, I'm sorry, who's going?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So if I can add to, this is actually, I feel the whole statement, and to Khadijah's point, definitely, I don't think it was, now that I think about it, the message probably just didn't come out right. And I don't want to say there was some malice in there, but it was definitely probably not the right thing to do, because if there's a flood, you shouldn't just, ask. If there's flood on both sides, you gotta take care of your own issues. So this actually shows the disparity and the disconnect between Africans and African Americans. Because I feel he probably couldn't relate to what's really happening in America. And at the same time, a lot of African American probably feel the same way as well. So this whole statement actually shows the disconnect, and then we can actually talk about it.
Okay, Ijambo, thank you so much. But you were breaking up really badly, but I believe we kind of got the gist of what you were saying, right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Elena, you said you wanted to.
Yes. So I actually Googled like where he lives or whatnot. And he's lived between London, LA, and Nigeria his life. So I don't think that it's because I don't think that he doesn't have a good grasp of what the Black Lives Matter stand for. And obviously we all have our different takes on what it is. And I don't think that it was a last minute thing. Because you mentioned that everybody else used their platform to highlight police brutality in America, right? Why would the 30 something second, as you said, why would that matter or hinder anything if he used that to shine a problem of something else? And understand the analogy in regards to the floods. And I don't think that, well, everything is how we choose to look at it. I don't think that it's taking away from, because I get the analogy. I just don't think that this is specifically what it's for in this case, because it's overly simplified. It's not the problem is not as black and white. And literally, you saying that everybody else, how many performers, how many different white people went up and said this and that, and he should have done what they did. The reason why we are even in this is because we didn't all do what everybody else did. The reason why we have Black Lives Matter is because we didn't just do what every other Black person who was assaulted, abused, and just all of that. That's why we're here, because somebody says something. And I don't think that the 20 seconds, like the question that Anthony asked before, I don't understand why it was a problem that he used. How long does it take to stay for Africa to 5 seconds? How that is taking away from this whole performance and this whole thing that was orchestrated simply for the Black Lives Matter movement in America, shining the light of the problem in America. Like I said before, it's different pertaining to everywhere else that you are in the world.
For me, I do want to be clear. After his speech, I forgot about it. 15 minutes later, I didn't think of it again. It didn't ruin the show. It didn't ruin, the theme of the show or take away anything from me. I just think we're just answering the question specifically because that's what the host asked. It wasn't like we're saying he just ruined the entire show and, he took away from the entire Black Lives Matter movement and, now none of Nigeria is going to know what it truly means. But we are just saying that, we feel like his use of his time was just inappropriate. And I don't know if everyone heard what Khadija said but I do agree with what Khadija said about, BET is a Black American show and he was invited there by Black Americans. He was awarded by Black Americans. And so when you come on a Black American show that's themed to speak about Black American struggles, and then you take your 30 seconds to say, oh, but what about Africa? Because that's pretty much what he was saying, because it wasn't like the show was already speaking about Africa or, that was already a part of the theme. The show was pretty much only speaking about America. And so he's the only one who brought up Africa. And it seemed like a kind of a what about thing. And it's a similar thing that I experience when I'm speaking with non-Black people of color. And they say, oh, we experience police brutality as well. It should be called, non-Black people of color matter as well. And all of this discussion, it just seems like that's true. Y'all do matter. I'm not going to argue against that. That's a fact. But this specific movement is specifically for Black Americans. And so, again, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you broke kind of in the last little statement. I didn't hear the last part.
The last thing I said was this specific movement is for Black Americans. So it was made by Black Americans. I do think it has expanded since then to involve Black people all over, but the core of it is to shine a light on the police brutality that Black Americans are experiencing. And I believe the host asked earlier for us to kind of speak about what we feel like the movement is for, and that's what I find the movement is for. So the movement is for Black Americans, their police brutality, and then now, since it's been years since it was made, it has expanded to Black people all over.
Yeah, okay, that's definitely a good point. I'm just going to give my personal thoughts on this real quick because I've been hearing everyone and you guys definitely made some points and I'm kind of torn here. So I'm torn because I feel like as a global Nigerian, African artist, his priority is to bring light or to uplift his people. That's his duty. That's his main, I guess, purpose or priority. And everyone has different priorities, right? And his brand and image is whether it be uplifting Nigerians or Pan-Africanism as a whole. So he saw an opportunity on BET, whether it be fit for that or not, I'm not entirely sure, but he saw that opportunity. I'm gonna be watched by many who may not know much about my culture, who may not know much about the struggles happening back home, even though it is not their responsibility to fix it. I just wanna make that clear to Khadijah's point, but I'm still gonna bring awareness to it because it's my priority and it's my duty to do so. So I'm trying to look at it from that point of view. Maybe that's what was going through his head, and he was like, yeah. And maybe his interpretation of the Black Lives Matter movement is, I'm Black, you're Black. Yes, this movement started in America, but it encompasses all Black people globally. And that leads me to my next question is, do you feel as if the Black Lives Matter movement was not as supported and pushed globally as you've seen, protests in France, in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, do you think it would have gotten the impact that is happening now, or I don't know if it's the change that America is feeling now? So do you think without that global support, the movement would really be what it is now? That's my question too.
I think the global attention has made the Black Lives Movement the movement that it is today. And I think that it's the fact that people are recognizing that there are just similarities and with interactions with people in color and law enforcement. So I don't think it would be as big of a thing. I don't know if Burna Boy would have shouted out if it wasn't global. I can't say if he did or if he didn't, but I think that the global attention has made Black Lives Matter a relevant conversation globally today.
So now with that global, so I agree with you, Anthony, by the way, but now with that global attention that it's gotten and everyone kind of adopting that movement, kind of creating little cohorts of, Black Lives Matter movement in their own country and adapting that movement to issues that resonate best in their country. Actually, let me back up. That is my question. Do you feel as if they should change the original meaning? Because I know Black Lives Matter was created to address police brutality against Black people, specifically in America, but I guess it's now just been police brutality against the Black community. Now, let's say, as Sit Pasamde mentioned, in Africa, it's a bit different because there isn't as much of racial tension as you would see here in America. But is it okay to tailor that movement to talk about relevant issues that we are facing in our country while still having that Black Lives Matter umbrella?
I personally think so. I think that Black Lives Matter was founded and they took into consideration intersectionality. I know that creators are members of the LGBTQ plus community, and they weren't just thinking about their skin color when they're talking about brutality, police brutality, right? And violence in general. People of color who are trans identifying people are at the greatest risk of violence in the world out of any group. You add Muslim on there, you add immigrant on there, you add all these other things on there. They are the group that is the most hurt. And I think that creators, being women who are part of this queer community, they definitely kept in mind that this isn't just about skin. It's about Black people who are disenfranchised in voting. It's about Black people who experience police brutality. It's about education. And I think that we have to recognize that all of these things are tied together. You take a community like mine that has been affected by mass incarceration. That is police brutality. Police are strategically choosing to go into Black neighborhoods and arrest Black people. And when they come out of jail, they can't vote, they can't get housing loans, they can't do all these other things. And when you have it maintains a cycle of poverty because now dad comes home, can't get a good job, or maybe brother comes home, can't get a paying job, and that puts him more burden. And what happens then? You don't go to a good school. And the cycle continues over and over and over. So I personally think that the women who created Black Lives Matter movement were intentional and wanted this to branch out and people to apply it to their different needs. Because even all the Black people on this Zoom call right now have grown up with different socioeconomic Some of us are Muslim, some of us are Christian, some of us have different educations, and some of us have privilege. I'm a man, I have privilege, right? And John Moore, right? We have privilege, and as Black men, as brothers, as people, we have to talk about this in our specific context. So I think it's intentional, and I think that we need to continue to expand our understanding of what Black Lives Matter mean and apply it to those different contexts globally.
I definitely agree with you. And it's just interesting to see that even with the different socioeconomic backgrounds that we all have, even some Black characters that were portrayed on TV were portrayed by by their white counterparts, which makes no sense. And it's all of a sudden that everybody is so aware that they're doing this or that they're taking these kinds of jobs away from some people who may not have the same economic background as I do, but still are lacking because they just were never considered for this kind of position ever to begin with. And like we've said before, it's not that it's taking away from anything, it's adding on to something. And you could just look at it from your context and what is going on and what is impacting you and make it fit what you need it to fit and keep going with it. Because that's the whole point of it evolving and embracing all people. And it was created for African Americans. And when you think about Black people in America, you don't think about, well, what about the Jamaicans? You know, what about the Trinidadians? They're Black too, and they're in America. And when they see them, they're Black. So and it just keeps expanding and it will encompass everybody. And the whole point of it was to highlight these issues. And like we've seen the shift of how it kind of started growing and just let's embrace all these kinds of people and all different kinds of people also helping this movement push forward. Just that's what it means, basically. Well, at least to me.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate. Do you feel like by just having people or communities keep adding on to different issues in the Black Lives Matter movement, do you feel like it's not going to dilute or lose the original sense of it? What are your thoughts on that?
That is very interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your statement.
I think it's interesting, and that is definitely something to consider. But really, when you think about it, I was doing some reading up on like what happened during the civil rights movement, all of that thing, and it was being added. So during that time, just because in America or in the books is not shown, these same people that were here and advocating the Malcolm X, the Martin Luther Kings, the Nina Simone's and the Maya Angelou were moving to Africa to do the same kind of work that they're doing here in terms of for Black people. And it just gets added on. And I feel like because today we have social media, you don't necessarily have to get up and go there, but it still is the same kind of idea to me that like, even back then, that's what was going on. And those same people went over and fought because they believed that they were brothers and sisters. And there wasn't, at least what we call it, this tension between African Americans and Africans in this country. That needs to kind of go on the back burner because that doesn't matter at the moment. I don't think that it will dilute anything as long as we're all clear of what it was meant for and what it is meant for.
So yeah, I was just gonna say that I think it's okay, to add on, little stuff, all the issues, because the Black community actually has a lot of issues. And I think it's just like when you look at it, it's pretty much like holding a Leatherman, les couteaux suisses là. You holding it and you have different tools that you can use in one knife. Like, you're not gonna use everything in the same, for just one thing, but there's so many issues that we need to address them, and then like having the Black Lives Matter movement is gonna highlight all of that. I know we're not gonna be able to probably fix everything in one shot, but as long as we bring awareness, using the Black Lives Matters and being cautious on how we actually push the message out, people are gonna be given an ear. Like, people are gonna listen, especially white people. They're gonna listen and hear what Black people have to say. So I don't think it's a bad thing. It's not necessarily bad. We just have to be cautious on how we move. And just like Killer Mike said, we have to have a plan and just pretty much like put the word out there, strategically. So it's really not a bad thing, but we just have to be cautious.
Yeah.
I definitely agree because I don't think it'll dilute the movement. Just that, because even if the movement grows, there'll still be like pockets or small niches of people that will go like put off the fires in like their different environments. So we have like LGBTQ, BLM, police brutality, even Africans or Jamaicans all together, like a whole umbrella. But there'll still be like those small niches there that will fight for what is most important to them.
Yeah. And I think also, I know we touched upon it briefly, but I believe the statement is hard to interpret, or why we have different interpretation because of those issues or divide that does exist between the communities, the African American, the African and Caribbean community. And I think it's worth acknowledging those issues because I feel like that's really the root of why some people may take offense to this statement. Ayana, what are your thoughts there?
I do feel like it would be a lie to say that the divide between Africans and Black Americans doesn't influence how we feel about Africans being involved or being included in the Black Lives Matter movement. I do think it's partly because sometimes it feels like Black Americans are very inclusive. Like when we celebrate things because the person is Black. Like very recently, I've been seeing online and I've been realizing like, oh, that person that was the first Black blah, blah, blah was actually from Kenya. Oh, I didn't even know that. Or that person that was the first Black president of whatever was actually, from Jamaica. I didn't know that. And that's because that's not really in Black Americans' MO to even question what country someone's from or to, try to divide ourselves based on what country we're from. But I can't say the same for other Black groups. It's very common that other Black groups divide themselves based on their country or their tribe, their ethnic background, and we just can't do the same. So I don't know if it completely applies to the Black Lives Matter movement. The more we discussed it, I do see that it makes sense to include problems that are race-based for all Black people. But I do want us to discuss how it can be sort of one-sided, that things that are created by Black Americans for Black Americans end up being for all Black people, like the Juneteenth celebration that happened recently.
Wait, question, or statement. You said something about other groups divide themselves based on tribe, location. I don't think that it's a divide. That's where and when you say I can't, Black Americans here can't, what I hear is because they really don't know or they cannot pinpoint exactly, even if you go through like ancestry.com or whatnot, you cannot really find out exactly where you were from. Like I know exactly what created me, everything up until this point. And even within that, I know that it's a privilege that I even have this knowledge because a lot of people have been deprived of that for various reasons. Obviously that we all share, but I don't think that it's something that divides us. It's something that brings us more together. Because I can just tell you where exactly I'm from. Whatever, we exchange cultures. I learn a little bit more about you. You learn a little bit more about me, and you take it back to your communities, and we just keep learning.
When I'm saying divide, I mean that when you all, and I don't want to speak about Burkina Faso only because I've never experienced it with Burkina Faso particularly, but usually Nigerians, Ghanaians, pretty much every West African country, when they create something, even in America, I am from a majority Black city. I live in like the suburb outside of that Black city. And there's this main road in that city, and most of the community is Black American, right? But there's a huge convention center that's a Nigerian convention center. And they have to be at least like 1% of the community, but they've created a Nigerian convention center that is only for them. It's not, if you're Black, come on in. No, it's only for them. And that's fine, but I'm just saying that's a very common thing in other groups. Jamaicans, when they create something, it's usually for Jamaicans, So I just feel like when Black Americans create something, we don't ever, or it's rare that we say Black Americans only. If your parents haven't been here for, I mean, if your family hasn't been here for such and such amount of years, you can't include yourselves. And when I'm saying that we don't look at people's background, I'm speaking about like Usain Bolt, for example. I know my family is big fans of him, and during the Olympics, when he performs, they're watching and supporting. I'm like, he's against us, right? We're supposed to be going for USA, but they don't care because he's Black. And that makes sense for us, for Black Americans, as long as you're Black, we're going to root for you. But other groups aren't like that. I don't think, Jamaicans would be rooting for a Black American just because he's Black. They're going to say, no, is there a Jamaican, competing against him? I'm going to root for that person. So that's what I mean about dividing. I don't mean that different ethnicities are, shouldn't say where they're from. I'm saying that there are certain things for certain groups, and it's okay when they divide themselves, but the same is not applied to us.
So like piggyback again on Ayana's point, she brings up like an important thing that usually happens, which is the fact that most people, for example, I'm gonna only speak from the experience of being like Ivoirian and American, people in Africa do tend to divide themselves. They do tend to focus on certain ethnic groups, and that does cause a division. Versus in the States, when you look at African Americans, we don't really do that. Like she said, the various examples she gave, if you're Black, you're all of us. There's no, you're from here, you're from there, blah, blah, blah. And that can be because of when we contextualize the way in which the knowledge we have, right? African Americans, we really can't afford to be doing that division thing. We don't, and we also don't really have the tools to do so because we can't trace that far back to be yeah, I'm from here, I'm from there. But it allows them to not divide, and it is a positive because when you look at Africa, for example, in the Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, the term Ivoirienté was created specifically to divide, to distinguish between certain Ivoirian, certain people that were categorized as Ivoirian. So if you're in Ivory Coast, if you are from the three main ethnic groups, you're Ivoirian. And if you are from Burkina Faso, you need to leave. The term was literally created in order to isolate people. But the tricky thing is, even though it's focusing on the nationality, the whole Ivory Coast, there's undertones of if you're in certain areas of Ivory Coast or certain ethnic groups of Ivory Coast, that's where that division causes. And if you look at Nigeria, for example, it's the same type of thing where it's kind of there's a lot of ethnic wars. If you look at Somalia, there were also ethnic wars there. And I do feel Africa is really strifed with ethnic wars. And I think when she talks about the fact that other people, other places are so quick to divide, it touches on those facts. The fact that most of the time the problems we have is because we're so focused on different ethnic groups instead of the idea that we are one nationality and then we are one continent, they do in America.
Which warrants this question. Isn't that kind of similar to what African Americans or Black people are doing here? So this movement was created for us and just for us. Mm-hmm. You cannot apply to it because you're not from here.
We don't do that.
That's why I clarified that. I do believe that, because in the beginning, you guys were kind of saying that, most of the problems we have in Africa are not based on race. That's what you guys said.
No. I said race applies differently depending on where you are and how you're looking at it. So our issue with race is different than America's issue with race.
No, what I'm saying is that when the police brutalize someone from a West African country, most likely they're Black as well, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And yes. when there's problems with the government, most likely the person that you're upset with is Black as well, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So what I'm saying is, what I was trying to say in the beginning was that I feel like it is not useful to apply it to Africans because most of their problems aren't based on race. The entire idea of Black Lives Matter is that people who are not Black do not see that our lives matter. And what I did say later on in the conversation was that I do now see how it can apply because, white people should see that Africa matters as well and Africans matter as well, who are also Black. But what I still stand by is that if it's not a race-based problem, it doesn't fall under Black Lives Matter. So that's not me saying that just because you're not Black American, you can't include yourself in the movement. What I'm saying is that if it's not race-based, it doesn't make sense to include it.
If we're talking about corruption in the Ivory Coast, for example, it's not really a Black Lives Matter type of thing.
I mean, okay, I'll speak about what
so you won't.
So a lot of the Oh, wait, sorry. I could not hear you.
Sorry, so I was saying, like, I was going to tie it back to Burna Boy, so you don't, like, come into States and be like, Africa matters too. Because, like, that's not what we were talking about. Like, that's not what we were on.
Mm-hmm. No, I get that. Well, just piggybacking off of just the statement that you made, like, if you want to talk about corruption, whatever, in Burkina, at least, it was instigated by European countries. So tracking back to Thomas Sankara and Blaise Compaoré and everything that happened then, and that is still happening now, unless you're a puppeteer of white, you cannot really be a leader in Africa because everything has to go through them and everything has to cycle back. So really, when you really want to look at it, it is all a race problem. I'm not talking about classism. I'm not talking about how we treat each other as Amosi and Yurbisa or Yugweringa, whatever. I'm literally just speaking on like the systematic aspect of it. And it does still make sense to apply it to African countries because all of that is literally still that. Just think about South Africa and apartheid and how it's still that way, even though it's legally not. It's still systematically made that way. It's the same way that it's applied here with gentrification and how it is. It's systematically applied to that. Anthony was speaking about how you can relate going to prison, mass incarceration of Black men, relating to it leading to children being in poor schools, which will continue the cycle of all of these kinds of things. It's systematic, and the same kind of system that oppresses people here oppresses them home, just differently. Yeah. Just because it's not like Black and white for everybody to see, it's still there.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to respond to your point here. Before we do that, I just want to put a quick disclaimer. So we were about to be out of time, but I feel like discussion is still like developing and people have, interesting thoughts. So if you guys still have time and you're okay to hang on, just let us know. But if you have to drop, that's also fine. But just to respond to you, Elena, I feel like it's what Ayana's saying. I totally get what you're saying. We have different rate. I wouldn't even call it a race problem because once you have an issue back home, 9 times out of 10, it's not because you're Black that this person is acting this way towards you. There are other factors there. But unfortunately, in America, the main contributing factor to oppression is someone's race, or someone, what they think is their race or what they look like. But back home, we all look the same. So I understand there are different tribes and different, ethnic groups and all that, but it's much harder to determine someone's ethnic group, I believe, back home than here because it's clear as day. You look at me, I look undeniably Black. I'm gonna go back home if I don't speak, if I don't say my name or anything. Nobody really has a true idea what my ethnic group is back home. They don't know. So that's why I feel like it's a bit different. And trying to take the Black Lives Matter and apply it back home, it might not be a proper fit. Maybe there are underlining, issues that relate back or correlate to the Black Lives Matter movement, whether it be systemic oppression or classism and all that, which can be experienced back home. But I can't say it's truly a one-to-one, comparison there.
Never want to. My statement has always been that it's different.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are and how you're looking at it. Yeah.
That's true. But I think it's just because you were saying you feel like it's okay to also apply it there. And that was just my thoughts. I just feel like it's not the same. And I don't think you can truly apply the Black Lives Matter statement back.
I agree.
Yeah.
You definitely can't. Go ahead.
You got it.
Oh, I definitely say you definitely can't apply 100% Black Lives Matter to African countries and also the ethnicities but my knowledge on this is half baked. But some of the ethnicities were given power through colonialism. So like the ethnicities that are in power, like Hutu and Tutsi, or like in Kenya, actually, even in Nigeria with like the Yoruba and the Igbo are the more financial people because like when the white people came, they gave them more power. So like I think there's also that kind of dynamic as well.
I agree. I think that when we're talking about white supremacy culture, I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of us reinforce white supremacy culture without even knowing it. And I think like when we talk about Black Lives Matter and how it applies to different contexts, we have to think about how we even perpetuate white supremacy culture. So for example, it's not necessarily like an action you do all the time. Sometimes it's a way of thinking. So like thinking that there's only one right way to do something that is a manifestation of white supremacy culture. Getting defensive when somebody points out your blind spot or your bias, that is an example of white supremacy culture, right? Even letting your day be run by time or your job, your identity is tied to your job. That is a manifestation of white supremacy culture. And I know that it is different when it's in Africa because, people look different. But I think that there are certain power structures that are in place that are proof of white supremacy culture, even long after white people are gone. And you do see that in different places all over the world. It's the same thing with even like gender. I try my best not to perpetuate heteronormativity and patriarchy and things like that. But at the end of the day, I know I do. And I may not be open or awake to those things yet. I'm always open to the conversation and people pointing out my bias. But I think that even as a teacher in education, I perpetuate white supremacy culture because I abide by the rules of an institution that was created by and for the benefit of white people with privilege. And even now, during COVID, teachers all over the world are discovering, wow, there's so much different shit that comes from white supremacy culture in my classroom. And we don't just see that in America. We're seeing that everywhere that's affected by COVID. And it just shows, right? Money, like how we prioritize the rich, how we give better healthcare to people who are rich, how we give better justice, more justice to people who are rich, how we give better education to people who are rich. That's white supremacy culture, right? And we see that not just in America, but in Africa as well.
Sorry, I just have a quick question there. So you said classism, or the way that we treat the rich or see people who are wealthier, that's a portrayal of white supremacy. But what about, like, let's say the Timbuktu Empire back home? They obviously had some type of classism and hierarchy there. And I believe in every culture, someone who's more wealthy holds more power, whether that wealth be money or cattle or gold, or there's still something that quantifies how wealthy you are, and that determines your status in society. And I don't feel like that specific point is relating to white supremacy, because I feel like in any culture, whether it be in Mesopotamia or in Timbuktu, people at the top were people who were wealthy. So I just don't 100% agree with that, Anthony.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. It's not necessarily something I was thinking about. So no, 100%. That's a fair point. I think that I guess in terms of America, it'd definitely be white supremacy culture. And like, if you go back in history, there's a lot of places that's been impacted of it. But I guess there could definitely be an argument that things like classism aren't necessarily an original manifestation of white supremacy culture. So thank you for that.
Any other thoughts? Jean-Mo, tu penses quoi? What are you thinking?
That's all fair points. I'm just observing today. I'm like taking it.
Okay. Ayana, any other thoughts?
I don't think so. I feel like we hit on everything.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to touch and make clear that if people in Burkina Faso or any other West African country were to create a movement, to speak about their individual struggles, I would definitely be in support of it. I would, keep the same energy that I have for the Black Lives Matter movement. And I feel like there's a lot of things that they could personally address that I wouldn't have experienced myself. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. Khadija? No words. Okay. Lolia, and then we'll end with Elena.
Was there a question?
Yeah, any last words?
Oh, and I think we touched on everything, honestly.
Touched on everything. Okay. Elena, any final thoughts?
Well, thank you for the points, Khadija and Ayana. Yes, I think I said it right. That they were bringing up, and I think it's just great that this is happening, and just the platforms that we all have, just wonderful. And hopefully our next revolutions everybody will know about too.
Yeah. So
I just say thank you to everybody. This was eye-opening. My original opinion changed. It's been contextualized a little bit, but I want to thank you all for your contributions. I've learned a lot, and I hope that everybody who watches this learns as much as I did.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I definitely learned a lot too. It's nice seeing, differing point of views in this topic and just how you guys understand it based on your personal experiences and your perspective. So this was truly eye-opening for me as well. This is my little part where I give the discount codes because I love doing that. So you could use the code BAIDI15 to get 50% discount codes on all products from Renaissance Beauty, by Madame Moi, and Barber Hair Care. So anyone who's trying to grow a beard or grow their edges or grow hair, anything, use products from Barber Hair Care. If you are, Anthony, I'm looking at you, you're gonna have a full head of hair if you use this product. Shameless it's not even self-promo, but shameless promo. And then if you buy Madame Moi, has nail polishes and great body products, if you need shea butter, everything. So you can get 50% off her products. And then the Renaissance Beauty is anything cosmetics, lip glosses, lipsticks, all that good stuff. So make sure you check them out and use the code. All right, thank you so much for joining, everyone. This was really awesome. And thanks for sticking on for an extra 15 minutes. And to everyone watching this, I hope you enjoyed the discussion, and I will see you guys in our next episode of We Talk. Bye.